Have you ever wondered why, no matter how much you've grown or evolved, some people seem to hit rewind on your life again and again? It doesn't matter how many storms you've survived, how many changes you've embraced, or how fiercely you've fought to become better to them, you're still stuck in that one chapter. The messy one, the broken one, the version of you that made mistakes, stumbled, or lost your way. They never mention the strength it took to heal. They don't celebrate your growth. They never say, "Look how far you've come." Instead, they drag your past into the present like a shadow you can't escape. But why? It's like a scar that's finally stopped hurting until someone walks by and presses on it, just to see if it still bleeds. Or like a set of chains you shattered long ago, only for someone to quietly pick up the pieces and try to bind you with them again. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people aren't invested in who you are today. They're attached to who you used to be because your evolution unsettles them. It exposes everything they haven't yet faced in their own lives. While you're focused on becoming, they're stuck in your becoming's beginning. And as they pull your past into the light, you're faced with a choice: defend who you were, or stand tall in who you are now. Because when you finally choose growth over guilt, when you stop explaining your transformation, that's when the discomfort begins. Not for you, for them. So what do you do when people refuse to let go of your past? How do you rise above the weight they keep trying to throw at your feet? Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll not only understand why they act this way, but more importantly, you'll know how to free yourself from it. Let's begin. Number 1. They haven't healed themselves. This is one of the clearest signs when someone won't stop reminding you of your past. The mistakes, the bad decisions, the words you said when your mind and heart were in survival mode. They talk like you're still that person. It might seem like they're just being real with you, but dig deeper. The truth is, it's rarely about you. It's about them. See, when someone hasn't healed their own wounds, they can't accept the fact that you have. Your transformation becomes a mirror, a reflection of everything they're still avoiding. Instead of doing the inner work, they'd rather keep you frozen in the version of yourself they feel comfortable with, the one that doesn't challenge their narrative. Because if you can grow, what does that say about them? The ancient Stoic Seneca once said, "He who clings to pain cannot walk forward." And that's exactly what's happening here. If they keep bringing up your past, it's because they're still holding onto pain, resentment, jealousy, regret, fear, pain they never resolved, and now they want you to carry it too. But that's not your burden. Let me tell you a story. A woman I know, let's call her Ela, went through hell in her early 20s. Bad relationships, poor choices, a path she wished she could erase. But Ela didn't stay there. She went to therapy. She took accountability. She rebuilt her life. Brick by brick, she found peace in becoming someone new. And yet every time she met certain people from her past, especially one childhood friend, they'd throw her lowest moments back in her face. "Remember when you used to? Wow, I never thought you'd end up here." Why? Because her growth made them uncomfortable. She smiled when she said it. "You've really got your life together now." But behind the curve of her lips, The words still cut deep. Eventually, Ela came to a powerful realization. That friend wasn't trying to rebuild a connection. They weren't reaching out to celebrate her journey or honor her healing. No, they were trying to quietly drag her back to a version of herself she no longer recognized. Not out of care, not out of closeness, but because her evolution unsettled them. Her progress shattered the image they had long held of her, and even more painfully, it threatened the story they told themselves about who they were. Her transformation made their stagnation impossible to ignore. So what do you do when someone keeps resurrecting your past? First, don't argue with them. You don't owe anyone a debate about your growth. You don't have to list your wins or recite your transformation like a resume. The way you live now, that's proof enough. Second, protect your peace. Just because a relationship has a long history doesn't mean it deserves a future. You're allowed to let go. You're allowed to walk away from those who cling to outdated versions of you. And third, walk boldly in your growth. You're not responsible for carrying emotional baggage someone else keeps digging up. You've set it down for a reason. At the end of the day, your past is just one chapter, not the entire story. And if someone insists on rereading those old pages over and over again, that says more about where they're stuck than where you're headed. So keep moving forward. Keep healing. And if they choose to stay behind, let them, because you're not that person anymore. You're not there anymore. Number 2. They use your past to control you. Let's talk about something darker, something far more manipulative. Sometimes when someone keeps bringing up your past, it's not about concern. It's not even about memory. It's about control. They don't just mention your mistakes, they weaponize them. They remind you of who you were, not to reflect, but to shrink you, to make you feel smaller, less capable, less deserving. They see your growth, but it makes them uncomfortable. So instead of rising with you, they try to tether you with guilt. This isn't love. It isn't friendship. It's emotional manipulation. You'll hear phrases like, "Don't forget where you came from," or "After everything you've done, now you think you're better." But these aren't gentle reminders. They're shackles. Their goal is simple: to keep you in a place of emotional debt, where you're constantly trying to prove you've changed. Where you're stuck chasing their acceptance instead of living your truth. That's not growth. That's submission. And this is where Stoic wisdom cuts through the noise. The philosopher Epictetus once said, "Do not hand over your peace to the judgment of others." Because the moment you allow someone to measure your worth by your past, you surrender your present. You give them the power to influence your confidence, your decisions, even your identity. But here's the truth. They only have as much power as you give them. Let me share a story. A man I know, we'll call him Jason, had a family member who just wouldn't let go of his past. Years ago, Jason had made his share of mistakes, wrong turns, regrets. But he'd done the work. He sought help. He built a new life, a new career, and found peace in himself. Yet every time Jason tried to take a step forward, that family member would cut him down with a sly comment. "Be careful, we know what you're capable of." Or worse, "Just don't mess it up this time." And it worked for a while. Jason would second-guess himself, shrink back, It felt like no matter how far he had come, he could never outrun the shadow of who he used to be. Until one day, something clicked. If someone refuses to see your growth, that's their blindness, not your burden. So Jason stopped defending himself. He stopped letting guilt steer his life. He stopped letting the past dictate his present. And the moment Jason reclaimed his peace, the moment he chose to own his growth, those judgmental words lost all power over him. So how do you deal with people like this? First, recognize the manipulation. Anyone who uses your past to make you feel ashamed of your present isn't helping you heal, they're trying to control you. Second, refuse to argue. You don't need to convince anyone that you've changed. You don't need to plead for understanding. Growth doesn't require permission. Your life, your actions, your transformation, they already say everything that needs to be said. And finally, protect your peace. You are no longer who you used to be. And you are not here to be held emotionally hostage by someone who refuses to let go of the old version of you. Number 3. They fear your growth. Now let's talk about one of the most uncomfortable, yet common, reasons why someone keeps dragging your past into the present. They're afraid of your growth. They see you becoming, evolving, rising into someone stronger, wiser, and more grounded. And instead of celebrating that, they feel threatened. Why? Because the higher you climb, the more they're forced to confront the fact that they haven't moved at all. Your evolution becomes a mirror, one they're not ready to face. Here's the raw truth. Your growth threatens their comfort zone. So what do? They don't attack who you are now, they go after who you were. They try to pull you back into that outdated version, the one that was lost, unsure, or broken. Not because they genuinely care, but because that version of you doesn't challenge them. It makes them feel safe, superior, unthreatened. If they can convince you to return to the past, they don't have to face the fear of being left behind. The Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius once said, "The one who seeks your past fears your present power." And that's exactly what's happening here. They don't want to acknowledge your strength. They don't want to look at your progress, because doing so would highlight the very thing they've been avoiding in themselves. The courage to change. So instead of rising with you, they try to drag you back down, not out of hatred, but out of fear. Fear that the gap between where they are and where you're headed is growing too wide to ignore. But here's the catch. You've outgrown that version of yourself. And no matter how many times they try to rewind the story, you're not stepping back into those pages. Let me share another story. A man I know, let's call him Eric, grew up in a tough neighborhood. In his early years, he made mistakes, got into trouble, even had a few run-ins with the law. But he turned his life around, went back to school, got a degree, built a business, found purpose. Yet every time he visited his old friends, the conversations sounded the same. "Remember when you got arrested? Man, I never thought you'd make it out of that mess." At first, he laughed along, thinking it was harmless nostalgia. But with time, he began to see through it. These weren't innocent memories. They were subtle reminders meant to tether him to the past. Why? Because his growth made them uncomfortable. Eric's success reflected everything they hadn't done. Every step he took forward was a reminder of the ones they never dared to take. And the only way they could feel good about themselves was by making him feel small. So how did you handle this? First, understand that it's not your job to shrink so someone else can feel tall. Second, stop trying to convince them you've changed. Your evolution is visible to anyone willing to see it. And finally, keep moving forward. The people who fear your growth were never meant to grow with you. Number 4. They refuse to accept the new you. You've changed. You've evolved. You've done the deep work mentally, emotionally, spiritually. The person you are today is the result of intention, reflection, and growth. But some people still treat you like you haven't changed at all. They talk to you the same way they did years ago. They joke at your expense like nothing's different. They bring up the same old mistakes, the same insecurities, the same flaws, as if the person you used to be is the only version they're willing to recognize. Why? Because your transformation threatens their comfort. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people lock you into an outdated image of yourself because it's easier for them to handle. If they acknowledge that you've grown, then they'd have to shift how they see you. And that takes effort they may not be willing to give. It would also require them to grow, and many people simply aren't ready for that. They choose familiarity, even if that means clinging to a past that no longer defines you. Your new mindset, your boundaries, your clarity, it all disrupts the dynamic they once relied on. They don't want to adapt to the new version of you, so they pretend it doesn't exist. But this is exactly where Stoic wisdom shines brightest. Epictetus once said, "You are not bound to who you were. Grow with reason and let the past be dust." You don't owe anyone the past version of yourself, not friends, not family, not even those who were there during your darker days. Your transformation is not an inconvenience. It's not arrogance. It's not rejection. It's a reflection of your strength, your willingness to become who you were always meant to be, not who you had to be to survive or to please others. Let me share a story. There's a woman I know. Let's call her Emily. For years, she battled anxiety. She was in a toxic relationship that drained her. But she made a bold choice. She stepped away. She rebuilt herself from the ground up. She began to heal, and in that process, she stepped into her power. But when she reconnected with old friends, something became clear. They still teased her about being too sensitive, still made fun of how she used to cry at the smallest things. It wasn't malicious, but it was constant. The jabs, the laughter, the sideways remarks. They didn't see her strength. They didn't recognize her evolution. They only saw who she used to be, and the more she changed, the more uncomfortable they seemed to get. Eventually, Emily understood something vital. They weren't rejecting her. They were rejecting the discomfort that her growth stirred in themselves. And that discomfort, it was never hers to carry. So how do you deal with people who refuse to accept the new you? First, stop asking for permission to grow. You don't need their approval. You're not obligated to stay small just to keep others comfortable. Second, don't shrink to fit a role that no longer reflects who you are. You didn't come this far to play pretend. And finally, walk boldly in your transformation. Let your presence speak for itself. The right people will rise with you. The others, They'll cling to your past not because they hate you, but because they can't handle your present. Number 5. They don't respect your journey. No, let's talk about one of the clearest signs that someone doesn't truly value you. They reduce your story to a single chapter, the one you've already outgrown. It doesn't matter how far you've come, how much you've learned, or how intentionally you've changed. They keep defining you by the version of yourself that no longer exists. They overlook the transformation. They ignore the milestones. They stay fixated on your lowest points, as if everything you've built since then doesn't matter. Here's the truth. If someone refuses to acknowledge your evolution, they don't respect your journey. Because real respect, it means recognizing that people can grow, that they can fall and still rise. That change is not only possible, it's a sign of strength. That they can become more than what they once were. But when someone keeps dragging your past into the present, not with compassion, but with judgment, it's not about being honest. It's about control. It's their way of boxing you and shrinking you down to a version they're more comfortable with. A smaller, simplified version of you. One they can easily label, manage, dismiss. This is where Stoic wisdom calls us to clarity. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Judge not the man by his past, but by the direction of his stride." That's the essence of true growth. What defines you isn't where you used to be, it's where you're headed now. It's the direction of your stride, not the weight of your past. And anyone who genuinely respects you will understand that. They'll honor your path, even if it doesn't align with what they expected. They'll embrace your evolution instead of resisting it. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Sarah, had gone through a lot during her early life. It wasn't pretty. There were dark seasons, painful mistakes, and wrong turns she wasn't proud of. But she didn't stay there. She did the inner work. She confronted her pain. She healed, and slowly but surely, she rebuilt herself into someone grounded, wise, and self-aware. Years later, she had completely transformed. But every time she visited certain relatives, the same comments would surface. "You've changed so much. We remember when you used to be such a mess." Or worse, "Don't forget where you came from." At first, Sarah laughed it off. She tried to be gracious. But over time, the pattern became too obvious to ignore. They weren't celebrating her growth. They weren't trying to reconnect. They were trying to reduce her, to shrink her down to a version they could feel superior to. They didn't see the woman she had become. They only saw the broken girl she used to be. So how did you handle people like this? First, stop trying to convince them. If someone is unwilling to see your transformation, that's not your failure. That's their blindness. And it's not your job to cure it. Second, set boundaries. If they can't respect your journey, they don't get a front row seat to your life. Growth doesn't mean keeping everyone close, it means protecting your peace. And finally, walk proudly in your evolution. You don't need their validation to keep going. You've earned every inch of the ground you now stand on. Never let someone who's trapped in your past keep you from stepping boldly into your future. Number 6. They want to keep you stuck. No, let's talk about one of the most subtle but most damaging tactics people use. They bring up your past not to heal it, not to understand it, but to keep you stuck in it. Every time you take a step forward, They pull you back with a reminder of your lowest point. Every time you find your voice. They echo the mistakes you made before you even knew how to speak with confidence. And make no mistake, this isn't love. It isn't care. It's about control. Here's the hard truth. When someone constantly reminds you of your past, it's not about honesty, it's about anchoring you in guilt. And as long as you carry that guilt, you hesitate. You hesitate to speak too boldly, shine too brightly, or grow too fast. Because they've conditioned you to believe you don't deserve it, that you haven't earned the right to move forward. That's the game. They don't want to see you rise. They want to keep you stuck in the version of yourself that they feel comfortable with, the version they can control. But this is where Stoic wisdom slices through the fog. Epictetus said, "Guilt unearned is a chain forged by manipulation." Let that sink in. Not all guilt is real. Some of it was given to you, imposed by others who benefit from your silence, from your hesitation, from your self-doubt. Because when someone can trap you in shame over who you once were, they gain power over who you're allowed to become. But here's the truth they never want you to realize. Your past may explain you, but it does not define you. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Daniel, had made his fair share of mistakes. He wasn't proud of them, but he had faced them. He took responsibility. He worked hard to grow them. And he worked hard, really hard, to become a better man. But there was one person in Daniel's life who never let him forget his past. His older brother. Every time Daniel spoke with confidence, every time he dared to chase something new, his brother would toss out a dig, a reminder. "Oh, funny how you think you've got it all figured out now. Ha, don't get too proud. We all remember the old you." And for a while it worked. Daniel would shrink, doubt himself. He'd question whether he really deserved this new chapter. But eventually, the truth sank in, that guilt wasn't his anymore. He had already carried it long enough. And if someone else still needed to hold it over him, it wasn't about redemption, it was about control. So how do you respond to people like that? First, recognize the manipulation. Real accountability should lead to growth, not silence. Second, release the guilt that no longer belongs to you. If you've done the work, you don't owe anyone your shame. And third, walk forward with strength and without apology. You don't have to stay stuck just to make someone else feel better about staying still. Because in the end, you cannot rise if your hands are still clinging to chains that someone else forged for you. Let them fall and keep climbing. Number 7. They're testing your emotional weak spots. Now, let's uncover one of the most calculated, subtle reasons someone keeps bringing up your past. They're not reminiscing. They're not holding you accountable. They're testing you. Here's the hard truth. Sometimes, bringing up your past isn't about memory, it's about manipulation. It's a way to provoke a reaction, to see if you'll flinch, to find out if that old wound still bleeds. They'll drop a comment, maybe even in a joking tone, but make no mistake, it's strategic. They're checking to see if you still carry shame, if you still feel the need to explain, if they still have emotional leverage over you. Because if they can make you react, if they can push that old button and make you defend yourself, they've found a pressure point, and once they find it, they'll keep pressing it. especially when they feel threatened, jealous, or insecure. But this is where Stoic wisdom becomes your greatest shield. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "He who cannot be provoked holds the highest power." And that's the truth. The less you react, the more control you take back. The more you remain calm, the faster the game ends. Because real power isn't loud, it's quiet. It's stillness in the face of someone trying to rattle your peace. Let me share one last story. A guy I know, let's call him Alex, had done a 180 in his life. He used to be impulsive, quick-tempered, easy to provoke. But with time and effort, therapy, reflection, discipline, he built real emotional control. But every now and then, someone from his past, especially one old friend, would throw in a jab like, "Don't get too calm now. Remember when you used to flip out over everything?" At first, Alex felt the familiar urge to react to prove he wasn't that person anymore. But then he paused, and he realized this wasn't a conversation. It was a test. This person wasn't acknowledging his growth. They were challenging it. So Alex chose stillness. No defense. No argument. Just silence. And in that silence he kept his power. So how do you deal with people who test you like this? First, spot the pattern. If someone brings up your past just to provoke you, don't take the bait. Second, practice emotional stillness. Not everything and certainly not everyone deserves your energy. And finally, protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. At the end of the day, your strength isn't measured by how loudly you defend who you were. It's measured by how calmly you outgrow it. And when they realize they can't provoke you anymore, they'll stop trying. If this message spoke to you, if you felt seen, empowered, or encouraged, do me a favor. Give this video a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm. Share it with others who might need it just as much. Drop a comment below. I always read them and reply when I can. Let me know what part hit you hardest. And, of course, subscribe to the Stoic Capsule channel for more powerful insights on growth, mindset, and the wisdom of Stoicism. Until next time, keep rising, keep growing, and never apologize for who you've become.